Fancy Productions here. Huh, why can't I hear that?
Mark Lawrence, burial
Oh,
last
there
night.
we go.
We have the professor with us, and we want to accomplish many things here. Mike Lubie, of course, has stated his position on last night's Dolphin game, angry with all of these social media posts about Brian Flores, which, Professor, I mean, looming very large right now is the fact that had what appeared to be or sounded like
Right?
just an absurd
Can we get a
conspiracy
little
theory.
like Lubie's getting angry? Can
Yeah.
we get angry that Stephen Ross and the Dolphins let Ryan fucking Fitzpatrick into the building to spread his lucky charms magic?
Oh my God,
And
you're right. Oh no.
First fucking time they do it, Tua goes down with a concussion. Probably a career ender. I mean, like, how do you let that piece of shit into the fucking building?
Good for you, Ken. I didn't even think about that.
The fucking cops arrest Tyreek Hill, but you let Ryan Fitzpatrick run around the city. Do your fucking job, Miami-Dade police. The minute that fucking Lucky Charms motherfucker showed up in the city, he should have been thrown in fucking prison. Like, how do you let that piece of garbage into your fucking building, Ross? I mean, the man spent 2 years along with Flores trying to kill Tua. And the first time he shows up, what happens? Like, I can't believe you let that scumbag into the building. Like, unbelievable.
Bad omen. No doubt about it. Bad sign.
The best way to kick off your day is with Defo plus Lubie. We now return to the Defo Show.
All right, welcome to the show. We fought our way, battled our way through the usual Lubie sabotage and a series of technical difficulties there, including seeing us as we were reacting to a previous pronouncement made by the professor here on the show. I'm Jeff DeForce. That is the professor, in for the traveling and vacationing Mike Lubie.
Right.
What bag of shit did he hand you this time to contend with? We couldn't hear each other for the first 15 minutes. Very diligent on your part, though, Professor. Thank you for getting up and
plugging away at it because, of course, it was Lubie left his computer on mute. It's the last thing you ever look for. He pressed the freaking mute button on the computer before he left.
Anyway, we have a great day to be with you here, and happy to have our audience on Bleacher Brothers with us. I had a nice experience with Bleacher Brothers over the weekend, Professor. You know I'm not a big fan anymore. I used to love going to the racetrack on their big stakes days. I mean, there's nothing better than going. You've been a couple of times voluntarily.
Florida Derbies, they're fun.
Yeah, Florida.
I mean, I like women in sundresses, so that probably has something to do with it. I'm not going to lie.
What was that?
So I do like women in sundresses, so that probably has something to do with my appeal of Florida Derby Day.
Well, and one of the great things about the Kentucky Derby is even the ugly women look good. Not that there are ugly women, but I mean, even the women that some people would consider possibly less physically attractive than some of the babes still look great, man.
They're all beautiful on the inside and on the outside at the Derby.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're not judging anybody by looks, but everybody looks great. And in the case of the Pegasus, which was the big race this Saturday that we were covering for Bleacher Brothers.
Oh, you went down there.
I went down there, and I only did it for the great A.J. Johnson and the fact that we're trying to further the cause here with the Bleacher Brothers Network. And he has a racing show that goes on Saturday with a guy named Joe Quill. Chef Tom is also a part of this thing, and A.J. himself usually participates on the show. And so they're trying to step up their game and do some big events. And sure enough, at the Pegasus,
one of them.
Yeah, it was great, but a totally different. The philosophy of Gulfstream Park changed dramatically when Belinda Stronach took over as the CEO of the company, and she did that. And I'm not making any judgments here, but somehow she sued her father and ended up taking control of the company.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes. The Stronach family had some inner turmoil, and somehow she ended up running the track.
Now, was this like the dementia or something situation? Because I know he was a much older gentleman when all that went on.
I don't think he was suffering any dementia. I think what he was suffering from was out of control children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daddy-daughter syndrome.
Yes, and and he invested heavily. He's a Canadian industrialist. Invested heavily, bought like 8 racetracks. Racing has been sitting there on the razor's edge of extinction for a long, long time. In fact,
he was one of the first to do the racinos up in Canada, right?
May have been, yeah. I guess he got that going. I think he might have owned Woodbine. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He came down here, established it. Look. The sport had to go in somewhat of a new direction, and
I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not out against the race. I would say he was a bit of an innovator within the horse racing sector. Was my point.
Well, and you happen to be a giant fan of the racinos with your passion, almost compulsion for playing roulette.
Yes. Unfortunate though it is.
Well, and the electronic roulette, I think, is probably the worst form of roulette. I mean, I'd almost rather spin a pistol there and will an empty chamber like you were in the Deer Hunter than play electronic roulette.
Although I will tell you,
You've had your scores.
Everybody else, you have that one location. There is one machine at Gulfstream that I think is a pretty lucky machine for me to be. I'm not going to lie. I would say lifetime, I'm probably up on that one.
Yes, I've seen you come out of there with stacks of sticks. It's great. The problem I have with it, though, is that roulette being largely an arbitrary luck game, like much gambling is,
100%.
particularly so. And people think that they can follow patterns. In blackjack, you're thinking, okay, I'll kind of go light until the deck turns in my favor.
And mathematically, that is true.
Goes in streaks. Roulette, every roll of the ball is as arbitrary as the previous one.
Well, all you need to know about that is that Blaise Pascal, who's one of the most famous mathematicians of all time, both invented roulette and died penniless because he went broke betting on his own invention. So if a guy who is like a top 10 math mind in history, like a guy you look up on Wikipedia, like one of the most famous mathematicians to ever live, couldn't outsmart a game he invented. What fucking chance do you think you have, pal?
Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting would have lost all of his money if he was playing roulette. But that being said, and we've seen it many, many times. I mean, if you've been in a casino and you hover around a roulette table, and I always love watching people lose their money as long as I'm not the one that's doing it. And you'll see a sea of red. There'll be 17 straight numbers that came up in the red on the board, and some rapper will show up there and literally take the wrapper off a stack of hundreds and plunge it all down on black, thinking that it was due. And of course, it's still 50-50 arbitrary, except for the fact that the house also then holds the edge with the green numbers.
Correct.
And now, there are no new casino innovations that are ever devised in favor of the players.
That's one.
Yeah. So, now they actually have like triple.
Yes,
zero
every
roulette.
machine at the Seminole places, they're trying to encourage you to play the live games, which have a higher limit. Most of them are minimum $5 tables. The machines are usually minimum of 5 total, but you could do 1 per spot. Whereas the live ones are 5 per spot. So the Indians, and in very Indian-like fashion, have made every machine a 000 machine, which also, unfortunately, is starting to dominate both live and machine tables in Las Vegas. And there's a lot of people who are very upset about it.
Let's put another negative factor in there that forces the players to dig deeper into their pocket. And in the case of the track, you're going straight to the ATM, the American Thoroughbred machine, usually after a few spins. But in live roulette, at least you have a little bit of time in between each roll.
Yeah.
And the tendency would be you have maybe your 5 favorite numbers, so you're going to play those straight up. And I'm not a big red or black bettor. I don't know about you. I used to bet into the what would it be? It's not quadrants. What would thirds be? Where you can bet the first 12 and then thirds 15 through 24 or whatever it is. It used to be an advocate of that, but I just want to have a stack of chips straight up on a number. And so, and maybe spread a few around just to cover yourself a little bit. So maybe you got like $10 on a number and a couple of dollars spread around here or there and maybe get your money back. But you're going to play the same numbers, usually consistently, and hope that as we experienced that time we were leaving Las Vegas, Professor, and we hit a horse race
group where we have like 5 in a row or something. It was a crazy run right at the end of the trip.
And that's the time to do it when you are wondering if you're going to make your plane. Like you're like, color me out and let's go to the window. And we're playing 13 black, which is one of my numbers that I favor quite a bit.
It was also the number of the horse that had just won the Kentucky Derby, which PC cashed
another
on. Yeah. And all the rest of us, literally, there were probably maybe 1,000 people in the Mirage Sportsbook that day.
It was incredible.
And PC and another fat guy who happened to also be from Chicago We're the only two people in the at PC was like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait in line for an hour. I was like, dude, there's like two people who won on this race.
Yeah, there was
out of
nobody
there in
online.
30 seconds.
So, but the point being about the roulette, I mean, if there's a spin every 30 seconds, as there is or seems to be on those electronic machines, I don't know how frequently the ball gets dropped.
30 seconds on most machines.
Your money is not going to last long if your
No.
numbers don't hit in the first couple of spins.
No, that's 100% true.
Whereas if it takes the guy a while, he's got to put the little marker on the thing, and then
It's usually about 2 or 3 minutes between spins at a live place. If if there's more than a couple people at the table, anyway.
That's my one concern. Just too many spins, and the more spins per minute that take place, the more likely you are to be separated from your capital.
I would say for the way I play,
because
I play the same numbers every time, they're my numbers. It doesn't really matter. Like yes, in terms of time, it's faster, but I'm either going to hit my numbers or I'm not. So the amount in between doesn't really matter to me.
Okay. All right. With me, I like to at least get a little bit of.
You want to put the time in. You want to eat some time
in terms of standing there, commiserating with the other people at the table. That
I get it.
You know what? When are they going to get rid of does the Asian dealer rule apply in roulette?
I think the Asian dealer rule only applies in blackjack.
Only blackjack.
That's my personal opinion. I have different things. I don't like an English guy stickman at the craps table, for example. I don't know. Again, this isn't like racism or whatever. It's just some people you have bad luck with, and nobody has ever had good luck with an Asian female blackjack dealer, except the house.
You're playing blackjack with some guy, Lou from Paramus, New Jersey. Yeah. You're doing fine. You're talking. You're having a good time. Maybe
he's got a 6 up. He goes 16-26. You get the Asian dealer. She goes 6-3, 9, 11, 18 or 16-21 every time. It's just, but I have not experienced. I will say, on the whole, I tend to have better. I don't even know what you call them at the roulette, the spinner or whatever. I have had better luck with women than men.
Yes.
In general, but I don't think it's a heavy bias. It's not like having an English stickman at the craps table or having like English stickman at the craps table. Just start betting sevens. Seems like it's all that ever comes.
As soon as I see PHU, Fu from Cambodia, I'm off the blackjack table. I mean, that is a definitive sign that you're facing the cooler.
I think it's the dragon ladies more than the dragon men, to be honest. But yes, Asian blackjack dealers, not a good sign. Asian women, you need to leave right now or not sit down. Even better idea.
We're out at Gulfstream on Saturday. The first race was like 11 o'clock, first race post time. They open the gates at 9 o'clock. And Belinda Stronach has long thought that get rid of the riffraff and the trash.
Yes.
And let's return this to kind of a James Bond-like high society type of crowd where you feel like you're walking into some European casino where the guy says, you're not walking in here with that T-shirt that says, go fuck yourself. You're going to have to dress up a little bit. And so it was that type of crowd. One of the interesting things, though, as A.J. Johnson and I are standing outside getting ready to do a couple of things, and who blows by us, but David Portnoy. All right.
Yeah, he loves the horse races.
Well, I think he loves all degenerate gambling. And this was great. And it was a sign that they were successful in establishing their transition, because we were outside a room where it was a $5,000 entry fee for the handicapping contest, which, there weren't the usual lineup of rats that had gotten in on a $25 online buy-in to the tournament. It was all people that looked like they were of very substantial means. And then beyond that, we see Portnoy, and Portnoy is didn't he start this whole barstool thing?
Absolutely did.
A man dressed as a slob, some kind of tattered T-shirt and a ball cap on, hair.
I mean, he wears like a lot of gear, like a lot of jerseys, and a lot of their whole thing initially, and it wasn't like they were making tons of money, but initially their whole model was they did the website, they did their stories. It was usually excuse me, from either a gambling slant or a humorous slant, as you're familiar with, or both. And they sold T-shirts. So used to be you always would see him in like a Barstool T-shirt because he was his own advertising to some degree.
Well, he's evolved from a fashion standpoint, at least when it comes to attending events like this.
I'm sure.
So he is, adorned in a classy-looking suit. And you wouldn't even have recognized him at first because he was all cleaned up. And then there's I don't know, is Portnoy married? He had some absolutely exceptional looking babe kind of
He's kind
following.
of known for that. He has a lot of good looking women around him. I don't think he's married, but I do not know that for I don't know one way or the other.
What impressed me though, and I know he's sending in substantial amounts of cash. He actually had a guy that looked like it could be a security guard handling and carrying what appeared to be an attache full of cash. So I'm not sure if there are limits.
I know he does a thing every year where he goes to the Derby, and I think he goes to the other two Triple Crown races, and he fires big. I mean, a couple $100,000 anyway, maybe more. So I mean, look, if you're going to be out in public with that kind of cash, it ain't bad to have the big guy with the briefcase carrying it.
It was great. I'm thinking, wow, I don't know that the methodology was particularly classy or ethical, where he was slandering people like Samantha Ponder to the point where she was reduced to tears, even mentioning this guy's name. But and I would imagine lawsuits were flying back and forth. But
I was unaware of that one, but okay.
But
I don't like her very much anyway.
You know what? I whether you like her or not, I mean, if somebody's calling somebody a flaming cunt constantly, I don't know what she did to Portnoy to alienate him to that extreme, but and it sort of was like a pop. What wasn't that some of which Barstool's popularity was built on taking this kind of approach? And
I mean, they're a rough and tumble in terms of language. I don't know that they necessarily go out of their way to bash women or anything. If so, I haven't particularly. I mean, look, in the early days, they did their stories. They usually had pictures of hot babes up, and they sold their T-shirts. That was, and I'll be honest, I have not been a regular Barstool viewer in a long, long time, years and years. So I don't know if it's maybe changed it. But in terms of language, yeah, you little kids shouldn't be going there to pick up language habits. Put it that way.
Yeah, but he was typical. I mean, I would say Portnoy was kind of representative, not from a personality standpoint, but the status of having a guy carrying an attache full of cash. What was much more representative of the type of crowd than, say, the people who used to join you on the infield at the Kentucky Derby and were involved in mud wrestling throughout most of the early portion of the card. So
I still kind of prefer that crowd, if I'm being honest about it, because
yeah, me too.
Particularly at the Derby, a lot of good-looking girls from the University of Louisville hanging out, passed out drunk in the infield.
My kind of crowd. I wanted to look more like Woodstock than what we witnessed there, although it was a first-class event. Had a great time. White Barrio ended up winning the race. I left him completely off my ticket.
I'm assuming that's a chalk, because I've heard the name before.
It wasn't really, it was like a $7 horse. I'm not sure if he went off the favorite or not in that race. There was a horse called Lock that everybody thought was a lock, although there was a stat that, and I tend to ignore these kind of trends. It's not like we're Mark Lawrence here, the ultimate trend handicapper, but there had only been 3 horses since the reconfiguration of the Gulfstream Park surface, which took place, I think, over 30 years ago. Only 3 horses had won from the 11 post. He actually broke from the 10 post because there was a scratch inside of him. But only 3 horses had won at 1 1/8 since that conversion, which is not necessarily a favorable trend to bet into.
No.
And that number remained the same after the Pegasus because Locked ended up finishing second to White Barrio, who ran away.
3 horses in 30 years is probably a number you want to pay attention to, honestly.
Yes, it's kind of like betting against Patrick Mahomes, which leads us to what happened over the weekend. Anyway, great time out there. I had a good time with Chef Tom and Joe Quills on their show. And now, it is an easy deduction to figure out why I couldn't find most of my friends at the track there on Saturday, because I think they were charging $100 to Valley Park. Otherwise, you were out by some bagel shop there on Hallandale Beach Boulevard and taking an Uber to the track. And it was quite expensive, the tickets to get in. I think just to sit at the bar where you normally can come in there and plunge yourself down for free were like $300-400.
Yeah.
So not my kind of thing.
It's a fancy pants event.
Yeah, first class event, and they had a lot of success with it. I think so.
Excellent.
Good time.
I like the people at Gulfstream. I'm glad to see that event is shaping it up to be the almost like a derby like atmosphere with the celebrities and whatnot that they've been trying to make that into.
Yeah, I don't know that they've quite gone entirely in that direction for the Florida Derby or some of their other big events, which
No.
Derby would be second. But good job. I mean, the evolution of the Pegasus Stakes or Pegasus Cup, very interesting to see. And they had a great card there that day if you were betting the races, which I eventually did from another location. Really, really a great betting card all the way through. All right, the big event, of course, was yesterday, and So Long Cinderella. I managed to bury some people there, suggesting, and there were a lot of ways to approach this. The tendency, the NFL this year has been almost all chalk, Professor.
Mhm.
You probably followed this at least from a degenerate gambling standpoint. Favorites were winning. Bookies were, walking out to the Dania Pier and ready to dive in with cement overshoes on, because usually that's not favorable for the people that are taking the bets. And it was a year dominated by favorites in the NFL, and then in the postseason, that trend started to change a little bit. And I think underdogs were slightly ahead of the pace against the spread in all of the earlier rounds of the postseason until yesterday, when we had two games on tap there. I gave the Commanders a little bit of a Cinderella shot. I don't know how you felt about that, but I
I did
thought,
not. We talked about it on a different show on Friday,
yeah,
and I thought legitimately in both games the public was just trying to outsmart itself.
yes,
Um, a lot
which
of
they did.
people, a lot of people on the Commanders, a lot of people on the Bills. In again a year that has been absolutely dominated by chalk, where I thought legitimately every sign was pointing at a very chalky championship Sunday.
You couldn't necessarily, start gargling with cyanide if you had the Bills in that game. I mean, they had every chance
No.
to win. In fact, I didn't realize when I originally watched it, because you saw, and Spagnuolo is great with this. You wish other defensive coordinators would do the same thing, where on a play where you just have to protect against a 10-yard pass or so, he just sends a blitzer. In this case, a corner blitz after Josh Allen. That chased Allen out of the pocket. He eventually had to throw a ball while he was falling backwards. But I didn't realize how remarkably close until I watched it again this morning on a video that Kincaid came to catching that ball. Because you're thinking, oh my God, I mean, that's a balloon. That looked like one of those things you mentioned, your friend PC, where you would invoke the infield fly rule.
Fly roll, yeah.
And we've seen that result favorably. Eli Manning may make the Hall of Fame just based on the fact that David Tyree was able to catch that Zeppelin that he threw up there in the Super Bowl that the Giants won many years ago. And so you're seeing this thing floating in midair, and you're thinking, wow, it looks like it might even scrape the bottom of the Goodyear blimp. And Dalton Kincaid makes a diving attempt in traffic, but actually has a very clear shot. The ball just kind of went through his arms as he was making the dive.
The crook of like his back arm.
Otherwise, here are the Bills still with more than enough time left to make something happen, at least to get into a reasonable field goal range. And while I'm not a huge fan of Tyler Bass, he has been clutch in these spots from 50 plus in the postseason.
Yeah, if he makes that catch, they probably need about one more first down, and they've got 2 minutes to do it to get in field goal range and tie the game. And you never know, someone pops open if they can get a score to win. But this is sort of the story of Kansas City is, particularly this season, they make that one extra play, and it's usually on defense, and it's usually with Spagnuolo coming up with some exotic. I mean, I think if you looked at that game coming in, you were going to say, okay, this is going to come down to Spagnuolo is going to do some exotic pressure, and Allen's going to make a play or he's not going to make a play. And then, in that situation, he threw the moon ball up, and he didn't make the play.
Well, and this is good for you, I believe, and any shows that you appear on. And we thank you so much for coming on the program here today. The professor with us.
No problem.
Mike Lubie Lubitz. And without the professor, we're not on the show today, because if Lubie had tried to explain this whole thing to me based on the fact that, he left a mute button on his computer, probably you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, what is this guy? Some kind of fucking mime? But now you have 2 weeks of material on, I believe, what is among your favorite subjects to dissect, and that is Brittany Mahomes.
Oh, yeah.
Patrick Mahomes syndrome, which I don't have any issues with Mahomes. A lot of people don't like him. I
I
remember
mean, other than the wife and the brother, both of whom really suck.
just a winning, dogged competitor that maybe he benefits from luck. I don't know if the Tim Donaghy factor was so much in play in this game. It didn't seem like it was officiated particularly.
Everybody's bitching
Lions
about that
fashion.
fourth down call. The one
That was very
where
interesting.
they called Allen short.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I was on the Chiefs, so I was not watching from a neutral perspective. I don't know if the initial spot was correct or not. I can tell you they showed the replay from about 6 different angles. And now, look, in that situation where there's just a giant pile of humanity, the odds of them getting a great shot are pretty low. But I didn't see a single replay that showed me that the call was wrong. It might have been not. It might have, been incorrect, but you didn't have a replay that proved it incorrect.
Yeah, this is where Josh Allen on a fourth down and a half an inch.
Mm-hmm.
It might have even been a nose hair. Josh Allen goes for a dive forward. It wasn't the tush push, but and you're thinking he had to move forward at least a slight.
I mean, he
just enough
thinks
to get
that,
that centimeter.
but he did it weird. He turned his back and he had the ball behind him as he's trying to sort of, back his way into it. And you couldn't really tell exactly where the ball was relative to his body, other than it was behind his body. So,
Crucial
a very
call.
difficult call. The Chiefs, of course, went down and scored. And, look, America in general is suffering from Chiefs exhaustion. I don't know exactly why. I sort of get it with the whole Taylor Swift and, Kansas City, Hollywood celebrity connection. I kind of get that. But they're looking for reasons to complain about Kansas City. And the default one has been the officiating. I didn't think there was anything particularly controversial in the officiating in that particular game. There was a catch with Worthy. Was it a catch? Was it an interception? Did it really matter anyway? Because there was a penalty on the play. But the ball did go down to like the 3-yard line, and Kansas City scores a touchdown. And maybe if they have to kick a field goal, et cetera, et cetera. Again, if I were on Buffalo, I might have felt differently about it. Watching the replay, I didn't see anything in the replay that disproved the call.
And it wasn't like he made it by any substantial margin if he did. I mean, it was the narrowest of differentials in terms of advancing the ball. And, these things happen. One official thought he achieved the line to gain, as they now call it. And the other guy on the other side said, no way. And the ruling on the field was he didn't make it. And as you said, 100 different replays, and you couldn't really decipher. Zapruder film type examination still wouldn't have let you know whether or not he made it or not. All that being said, crucial play in the game. Still, Mahomes rallies the team, gets the field goal at the end. And, if Kincaid makes that catch, then it might have a different story here today. I know Josh Allen, he was feeling a little bit like the tennis player, Alexander Zverev, who lost to Sinner in the finals of the Australian Open. And you're asking yourself, am I just not good enough to beat these guys or to be in a situation where I'm going to win a championship? And I'd imagine he'll shake that off and come back next year. Good season by both teams, though. Chiefs installed as 1.5-point favorites. Does that surprise you? Because with the
No, that sounds about right to me.
Impressive showing, though, by Philadelphia. I was not overwhelmingly enamored with Philadelphia's offense. So we know that Saquon Barkley has been the difference maker. And you have to ask yourself, how does Joe Shane, who somehow retained his position as general manager of the New York Giants after an abysmal 4-13 season, how does Joe Shane sleep at night? This guy shouldn't get a wink of sleep, as he was the guy that made the brutal decision, as it turned out, to retain Daniel Jones as his quarterback at $160 million. Jones not even with the team when the season ended, had to cast him away somewhere else as if he was Chuck Mersine back in the day. And here's Saquon Barkley. Could you not make a case that this guy should unequivocally be, that was a tough one to get out early in the morning, unequivocally be the MVP of the league?
I don't know about unequivocally, but you could certainly make a case that
you
he
did it too.
should be
You got it in
MVP.
there. Good job, Professor.
That said, in terms of the Giants versus the Eagles, with any running back, including Saquon, and if you go back and watch that highlight of the first run, which was the sort of set the tone for the game, he doesn't get touched till he's 15 yards down the field, and he's up against a corner on the first touch. Well, if you put really any NFL running back, but particularly one like Saquon, who is particularly talented and particularly good at those long explosive runs, and put him in a situation where you're just running a simple toss, or actually wasn't a simple toss, there was some reverse pull action, but you put him on a toss play and nobody puts a hand on him for 15 yards, the odds of him making a really long run out of that are pretty freaking good. And, which gets back to the point, as great as he has been with the Eagles, is he that same guy on the Giants with their offensive line? No, he's not. I mean, look, it is a synergy on the team. It is the fact that Hurts is always a run threat that you have to dedicate at least one linebacker to spy on. It's the fact that their offensive line is just an absolutely dominant unit. And then you combine it with, again, Saquon's natural ability for explosive runs. And, you got what could have been a historic season if he had played that last game.
Yes, I don't mind that he didn't, though. And with these records and expanded seasons, it's funny because my viewpoint has changed on that a little bit. As I was a huge Roger Maris fan, 1961. And Maris and the Mick were putting on an unbelievable show throughout the season. It was very much, although they were on the same team, made it even more exciting because I was a Yankee fan at the time. And so in 11, I guess I was a 10-year-old DeForest. And, grew up naturally rooting for the winning team, the Yankees. The Mets didn't come along until 62 when I changed my allegiance. But, that 61 season was amazing. As documented beautifully, the movie 61 by Billy Crystal is just great. And does Barry Pepper, does he look like everybody, Professor? A spitting image. I don't know that he looks so much like Dale Earnhardt. I don't know, but everybody he plays, Barry Pepper.
All I want to do is race daddy.
But he legitimately, you would have thought Roger Maris came back from the grave to play himself as a young man in that thing. And I forgot the guy's name.
Honestly, though, can't you take any blonde guy and give him that haircut and he's going to look like Roger Maris? I think that the only keys there are the blonde hair and the haircut.
Maybe so, yeah. But I always thought, well, geez, this Ford Frick, what a prick. I mean, to put the asterisk in there. And I want to say, and I think I can say this with some level of certainty, that was the first time the hideous sports talk argument about does this need to have an asterisk ever came up, wasn't it?
Sounds about right. The genesis of it. I'm a records are made to be broken guy. And look, OJ had the record. Dickerson played 2 extra games, and Dickerson broke OJ's record with 2 extra games. And now Saquon with an extra game over Dickerson has a chance to break it. And it's not fair. He got an extra game. But you had 2 extra games.
So, a season is a season. Used to be that. Yeah.
I mean, that's
the players don't design or devise the system to decide how many games during a season. So with the greed and avarice that all of these professional sports entities now approach things, you're going to constantly see expansion of games, although I don't know that baseball certainly couldn't survive it, I don't think, in terms of interest level. And everybody that watches NBA basketball now wishes we would cut the thing down to 60 or 70 games.
Well, look, sports have a natural evolution. And I was a big Eric Dickerson fan. He and Marino came to the league at the same time as rookies. It happens to be my first Dolphins game was Dan Marino's first start for the Miami Dolphins, like game 4, game 5 of the 83 season against the Los Angeles Rams and Eric Dickerson. And Dickerson had like 180 yards and Marino threw for like 340 and a couple of touchdowns. I don't remember the exact stats, but Marino had a big game. And all that whole year they were going back and forth. Who's going to be rookie of the year? Dickerson's leading the league in rushing. Marino's leading the league in passing, but Dickerson played for him back and forth. So I was a big Dickerson fan. But let's be honest, when Eric Dickerson, who was a big dude for his day, he was like 6'2", like 225, and had world-class speed. He was one of those guys who, had he gone track and field, could have ended up in the Olympics. When Dickerson played, there were like 2 dudes on the defense that were as fast as Dickerson, and they were both corners, and Dickerson outweighed both of them by like 40 pounds.
Yeah.
Now, you get out on the field, every linebacker can run like the wind.
True.
It's just a different sport. Baseball. I was talking about it with a guy last night, and he was talking about a high school kid that he works with because he's a baseball guy, and he coaches on the side privately. And it's like, oh, yeah, he's a sophomore, and he already's throwing 82 or something. I was like, yeah, how many dudes do you see who throw 82 or in the majors now? Like that, If you can't throw 100 these days, you're not. I mean, again, like every team has like 5 dudes in the bullpen. They can only throw 1 inning, but they come out and throw 103. Yes. And now you got this freak Skeens who could throw 103 on his 130th pitch. Like, there's just an evolution to the sport. And then you look at basketball. We're in the middle of it in the NBA, with Wemby really starting to blossom in his second season. You're talking about dudes who are like 6'10", who have been playing basketball their whole lives, have been great at it, and Wemby covers them, and they're confused. They're like, this is just a different animal than I've ever seen before in my life, because with his reach, he's already above the rim. I mean, and those guys weren't around back then.
Yeah, a lot to be said for it. Yeah, the factors definitely balanced out a little bit. So had he broken the record? Is it a single season record? Yes. Should he have played in that last game? I think we saw evidence that
maybe not.
It was the right decision not to play, because he was nursing a calf injury anyway. It seemed like all throughout this ball game, he had the little massage thing. Does that thing do any fucking good? I've had people apply it to me, and it just seems like
I've never personally used one. I am told that yes, it does actually.
Oh, really? Because it just reminds me of the old days when you used to give a guy a noogie. And then in that case, it was in the head, but it doesn't seem like it would be all that impactful.
The lovely Gia uses one after her various workouts and yoga and such, and she swears they're good. So I got to take her word for it, because it's not like I'm going to go, do a 76-yard run and then have one put on my calves.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would have conceded if Barkley had broken the record, it would have been fine. It didn't bother me that he didn't play in that ball game, and sort of more honorable. I mean, if he was with the University of Florida, of course, he would have been out there and carried on the first 25 snaps to try to achieve the record
look,
deference to the Gator flop. Sorry, Mike Nyman, I had to bring that up.
Regardless, he has had an amazing season. Between him and a couple of other backs throughout the league, the running back position looks like it's back. And,
yes.
You look at the 4 teams yesterday, 2 of them were sort of running back central. I mean, the whole key with all the weapons they've lost for Josh Allen for the season for Buffalo Bill was the development of James Cook, who became, a really dangerous guy, both running and catching out of the backfield. Like I said, to a large degree, it looks like the running back position is back in the NFL. And, the guy who's getting ripped is, the Giants GM for giving Barkley away, for not wanting to pay him.
Yes, and while that was, a bad move, as it turned out in hindsight, and it seemed like it probably was a bad move at the time because people weren't enamored with Daniel Jones. Still, I mean, there was this theory adrift, and that'll probably change philosophically now, where people thought running backs were interchangeable. We'd seen some evidence of that, even at the highest level, and that it's too much of a risk to give a running back a long-term contract, because there's a good chance, strong possibility that the guy doesn't last nearly as long as the length of the contract at the highest of levels. But you couldn't have a move backfire and blow up in your face more than Joe Shane did, and it was sort of remarkable that you can make a blunder of that magnitude in terms of production and results, and still retain your job after having a 4-13 season. So,
I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan, so it's not remarkable to me.
and that's the other thing, for the local people here that are tuned in. Of course, Professor and I both in South Florida, as is the base for Bleacher Brothers, but and their home offices. But you always ask yourself, as you're watching these teams that are in this stage of the postseason, now heading for the Super Bowl and the conference championship games, how far away is your team from looking like those teams? And you would have to say the Dolphins are quite a distance away, no? I guess teams and fans in a lot of cities could be making that same observation, but it doesn't look like the Miami Dolphins in terms of just overall toughness, talent, schemes, coaching, personnel, roster, backups, and depth. It doesn't seem like they're anywhere close to the 2 teams that are going on and moving to the Super Bowl. And you have to credit Kansas City also. I mean, they lost a lot of steam off the team that went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And here they are back in it again for the first possible three-peat. I guess that there have been possible three-peats before, but they're the first team to get there, winning 2 straight and get to a third one. I want to say yes to that. Because
I know they're going for the first three-peat. I don't know if anyone's had a shot at it before. I'm trying to remember if New England maybe had a chance somewhere during their run, but nothing's clicking in my brain. Look, I think what you look at, and as it applies to the Dolphins, the lessons you gain. Look, I mean, number one, and me as a draft guy, I hammer this anyway. You look at all the success stories in the NFL this year. You have to win consistently on draft day, and it's not just round one. It's up and down. You have to hit in round one. You have to hit in round two, but you also got to pull a guy who can randomly be a starter out of like rounds 5 and 6. And you look at the franchises who have been consistently successful for the last decade or so. That's been the formula. The rise of the Detroit Lions. The formula is they consistently won on draft day for about 4 years in a row. And not just one, they won spectacularly. Everything hit. And they have built one of the best offensive lines out of it. Again, amazing skill position talent everywhere, to the point where Jared Goff, who didn't look like his last year in Los Angeles, he could find his ass with both hands, turned into one of the best quarterbacks in the league, because all of a sudden, if you're handing off to super talented running backs and throwing to wide open wide receivers because they win consistently on their routes, the game gets a lot easier for your quarterback. Buffalo, same thing. Philadelphia, again, been winning in the draft, particularly on the defensive side of the ball for years now. Kansas City, again, reload with through the draft. Particularly at the skill positions where they've had to cycle guys out because there's a salary cap and they just can't keep everybody. Washington would be the exception, but they would play into the other key, which is, look, we all focus on head coaches, and we love to do it down here in Miami. At the Hurricanes, we got Mario Cristobal. We're all excited. We got Mike McDaniel. He's a genius. He's a play call genius. And look, he's done some really good things, but offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator have to be on point as well. And you look at Andy, you look at Kansas City, and yes, I agree. Andy Reid's the de facto offensive coordinator, so it doesn't matter so much. But he and Spagnuolo work perfectly together. They, they have that rhythm of the defense makes a big play, and Kansas City comes out and creates a big play and offensive off of it. They have that synergy. Washington, again, Cliff Kingsbury, first time OC, made a huge difference in that offense and wasn't afraid to come in and sort of customize the offense to the talents of Jaden Daniels, which are not necessarily the conventional quarterbacking skills we think about it. Philadelphia, again, come in.
They got lucky when they got Jalen Carter after he had that whole business there
where he killed somebody drunk driving. Yes,
killed somebody while he was drunk. Yeah.
But again, such a synergy between the way that team. Look, if you were watching that game yesterday, and the first drive, Washington goes on like an 18-play, 75-yard drive that results in a field goal. I had Philly in that situation, and I had a couple texts. Blah blah blah. I was like, I'm not worried about it, because if you watch that drive, yes, they kept making miracles on 3rd and 4th down, but Jaden Daniels was also getting pressured on literally every drop back, and Philly didn't blitz once. They were playing zone behind them and just letting their 4 guys heat up Daniels. Like, this is a formula that's going to work out for the Philly defense throughout the course of the game. And then, of course, they got the 70-yard run. The next play is like, yeah, we're off to the races here. But the way they play with a ball control offensive line, a great running game, and a dominant defensive line, I mean, that's old school football that, again, works and blends together perfectly, because they can just choke. And that's honestly what I didn't think we were going to see a shootout yesterday. I thought we were going to see a game where Philly just choked Washington out. But even without that, it just all clicked. And again, the NFL is sort of an amazing sport. To me, it's why I love football, the best of all sports. And I know that puts me in line with everybody else in America.
The majority, for sure.
It's that everything within an NFL franchise has to click and work together, from the front office through the general manager, through the head coaches, through all the assistant coaches, onto the players on the field. It all has to be synced up, or it's probably not going to work out. And then you might make the playoffs, but you're going to, lose in the first round if everything's not clicking together.
Andy Reid, of course, having a great run and now considered among the best. I don't know. Does he deserve consideration as the best of coaches? Did well in Philadelphia for many, many years. They part ways with him, thinking that The players aren't hearing his message anymore. He lands in Kansas City, 7 straight conference championship games, now a chance to win 3 straight Super Bowls. The subject of massive ridicule because we always referred to him as the fat man. And we speculated for years, Professor, you and I did on many, many shows that the play chart actually on the back of it, the side you couldn't see, was a menu for a barbecue place in Kansas City, which you also say, and if we're assessing this on food, it's going to be kind of interesting.
Easily
Philadelphia
the cheesesteak.
versus Kansas City, the cheesesteak versus barbecue. But you being also a culinary expert, not a fan necessarily of the signature dishes of either city. So
I know I like the cheesesteak.
What can we do?
Who isn't a cheesesteak fan? I know I like the cheesesteak. I love barbecue as a generalized term. I do
You're
not
an
love
expert
Kansas City
on the grill
barbecue.
yourself.
I do not love Kansas City barbecue. The sauce and the style is just too sweet based for me.
Yeah.
They put all that molasses in it, and all you can taste is a goddamn molasses.
From a sports talk standpoint, the week where there is no game of the first of the 2 weeks leading
It's
up
a
to the
tough week, right?
always a fucking disaster. I mean, you're trying to get through it, and maybe you even make some kind of moratorium on Super Bowl talk until we get to the Super Bowl. Usually, we were in some Radio Row setup there for most of the second week, and that always a lot of people would rail away and say this is a joke. It's an over commercialized. A ploy for the NFL to just sell product, and that some of that was in evidence because. Peyton Manning would sit down with you to do an interview, and before you even got started, you had some PR guy telling you, "Hey, push the pork rinds, push the pork rinds." And you're thinking, "Yeah, that would be my first question to Peyton Manning if I had a chance to interview him." Hey, Peyton, how come you're such a big fan of pork rinds? But you would put up with a little bit of that. So what if Michael Irvin's going to come on your show and then spritz a little right guard underneath his left armpit while he's sitting there on the set? It's radio. It really didn't matter all that much, and you could make that illusion. But you would never have the opportunity to interview that caliber of celebrity, whether it was sports and they would bring people in from movies and all kinds of different artistic genres. Boxers would show up. Money Mayweather was always a frequent presence there, and many others. Sugar Shane Mosley, as much as he was having some difficulty expressing himself, it was always a novelty for me to see the variety of other people that would be there. But the week leading up to it, I don't know what. Taylor Swift and Kelsey, people sick of that story? Can you make anything of that?
I think you get today's show and you get to sort of recap the games and talk about the two. I personally am kind of put a moratorium on it Tuesday through Friday. That's just me. But I can talk college basketball all day long, and not many people give a flying fuck, particularly at this time of year.
Seems to be in the distant background, except for degenerates that have to embrace the sport.
I guess this year, because of the matchup and because Kansas City's still alive, you can, you got the celebrity nonsense that surrounds the Kansas City Chiefs, and now you got a three-peat, and you're getting a rematch from what was a really good game 2 years ago. So you might be able to, squeeze 2 weeks if you really go out on an edge about it.
Yeah.
And now, because everybody wants to bet these stupid player props, you could squeeze a whole show out of, Saquon Barkley going to score a touchdown over a touchdown and a half. Is A.J. Brown going over and under 62.5 yards and blah, 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 blah. So, there's a lot of that this time of year for the Super Bowls. And, you bet on the freaking halftime shows. Who's going to be Kendrick Lamar's secret, guest star? Who's, what's going to be the first commercial? What's going to be the last?
Always one of our favorite plays. I like to have all of my bets cashed before they actually kick the ball off.
Agreed. Coin toss, anthem, commercials.
Coin toss, anthem, that sort of thing.
Then I could just play a square or two and be good.
All right. So what do you think? Let's take a quick peripheral view here of the matchup because we just had it established. You do have the Chiefs as 1.5 favorites. I actually was thinking before we came on that Philadelphia might be favored based on the overwhelming impressive nature of them putting 55 on the board.
Look, here's the thing. How many squares bet this game? I mean, what normally, and if this were a regular season matchup, the square action is going to be pretty high.
Yes. But
in the Super Bowl, it's going to be off the charts. And I got to think most of the square money is going to Kansas City. Why? Because they've been a name brand for, 5 years in a row now. So that Kansas City's installed as a slight favorite does not stun me in the least. Does it immediately lead to, a lot? And I'm actually seeing this is already up to 2. So
Oh yeah, wow.
again,
Sending it in on the Chiefs.
early action on the Chiefs. In terms of looking at an angle, offense, defense, we know what the Eagles are offensively. We know everything is surrounded on the run game, including, Hurts himself. Bad news, Kansas City's 8th against the run. They're solid against the run. You look at Philadelphia, best team in the league against the pass, and 10th best against the run. So, do you think Saquon Barkley and the Philly offensive line is more likely to defeat the Kansas City run defense, or do you think Patrick Mahomes is likely to figure out how to beat the Philly passing defense? And my instinct, particularly with Vic Fangio, who we know he does not like to blitz. He wants to pressure with 4, and he wants to play zone behind it. I don't know that you could do that all game against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I don't know that that's going to be a winning formula. My initial instinct, they've got Hopkins, they've got Kelsey, they've all got all these guys that are experienced zone beaters, and Mahomes' footwork has always been good enough in the pocket that if you're not blitzing him, that you're going to get him off his spot. And even if you do get him off his spot, he is so good at throwing off his spot. My initial read, probably a slight lean to the Chiefs, just because, again, Spagnuolo, one of the best, if not the best defensive coordinator. I mean, he might be in some ways the modern day, early stages Bill Belichick, when Belichick was one of the great defensive coordinators and not so much as a head coach in that first stance against the Cleveland Browns. That's sort of where Spagnuolo seems to be in terms of his career. Again, if we get a typical Vic Fangio game plan, I don't know that you could just sit in zone all night against Patrick Mahomes. He's going to find the soft spots. And Kansas City, when they missed the Super Bowl a few years ago against Cincinnati, it was the year they lost Tyreek Hill, and Patrick Mahomes had problems with being patient. Like he wanted to force the ball down the field. You watch him today, that's the way they play. That they are built to, we're just going to eat you up 7, 8, 15 yards at a time. So just initial read, if it goes, by standard game plan, probably the Chiefs.
The narrative going into that Philadelphia game too. You had the so-called Cinderella story set up there with Jaden Daniels, who you were talking about the draft. You need a little bit of luck too when you're drafting.
Sure.
Guys fall into your lap sometimes. That would be unexpected, as was the case with Jalen Carter and the Eagles, who were, what was he, the 6th overall pick? And you would not have anticipated him dropping into that spot. It was very much Warren Sapp-like after that incident.
I want to say it was more like Sapp. I want to say it was like the 14th to the 15th, maybe the 13th pick.
I think Lubie and I looked it up the other day. I think he might have gone 6th overall. Is that possible? But you're sitting there in a position where you should never be able to snare a guy that is going to be just a standout right from the start. And Philadelphia was able to do that. Jaden Daniels, of course, was not. You weren't particularly high on Jaden.
It was the 9th pick, by the way.
Oh, 9th pick. Okay. Oh, that's right. I thought he was a 9th pick, and Lubie convinced me he was a 6th pick.
Yeah, no, he was the 9th pick of that draft. But which is, honestly, he should have gone in the top 2, but he had the off the field stuff.
Off the field stuff, and you need some of that. I mean, if you're going to be successful. I just remember probably the most dreadful couple of weeks leading up to a Super Bowl was when, and the Super Bowl was here, had to be maybe, what was it, 15 years ago? Was it that far back when the Chicago Bears played the Indianapolis Colts?
That might be 20 now that I'm thinking about
Peyton
it.
Manning was the Colts quarterback, and there wasn't much there. Everybody thought that the Bears were going to be soundly defeated in that game. And they did lose, but nonetheless, the only storyline that anybody was exploring, and it got crazy.
That was 18 years ago, by the way. It was 2006.
Freeney-gate. That was the whole thing. Freeney-gate. Everybody was concerned about Dwight Freeney, who, of course, was a Syracuse guy that had the greatest spin move in the history of. He looked like Earl Monroe when he was rushing off the edge there. He would do that dynamic spin and get to the quarterback. Had a bum ankle that looked like it was going to be very, very prohibitive for him to be as effective as usual. And I don't know that he was, but I remember in the coverage, they went to the extreme that they had like strapped an ankle bracelet to the guy with a camera on it just to see the development and evolution of this through the couple of weeks. And that was it. It was horrific. I mean, you couldn't find a story to latch onto. So I think that's hardly going to be the case. But one of the narratives going into this Eagles game was that Jalen Hurts, which we saw that he was somewhat impaired with a knee injury. And people were thinking, oh, geez, well, he's not going to be able to run the ball. His passing seemed to have tailed off a little bit. And he goes out there, has a sensational game, and especially even throwing the ball down the field. He made some great passes there.
He did.
Yeah, A.J. Brown was a recipient on the receiving end of a couple of them. But these were not easy passes. It wasn't like these guys were wide open. Jalen Hurts really made an amazing account of himself. Considering that the conversation leading into this game, and maybe we should never believe this kind of stuff, but was that he'd be lucky to be anywhere close to 100% by the time he took the field.
I mean, modern medicine, man. Like and in the NFL, if you can go, they've probably got a shot that'll make you feel good for a few hours. I mean,
as evidenced by Novak Djokovic in that Australian Open when he played and almost won a set against the number 2 guy in the world with a torn hamstring.
I mean, if your leg isn't falling off, like I said, they probably got a shot to make that leg. I think Hurts is a little underrated as a quarterback, and I'm not saying he's in that elite group, but 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. They made the playoffs in the off year where sort of everything was falling apart, both injury and team synthesis. In the year between, the guy's he's not a conventional quarterback by any means, but I think we've now gotten to the point, when the NFL, sort of like we saw with college football, where coaches are now getting or willing to be creative enough in the NFL for a number of reasons. Number one, I think the whole Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, this guy's going to be our quarterback for 15 or 20 years thing. I think that's kind of faded in the NFL these days. I think coaches realize I don't have 15 or 20 years. I got maybe 3 to 4 years to get it going. So if I have a quarterback, but he takes enough hits that he's only going to play, 7 to 10 years, that's fine by me. We'll recycle at that point. So coaches are running things more open. They're less afraid to get a quarterback. A particular guy like Hurts, who, famously when he was Oklahoma, the guy was squatting like 650. He was squatting as much as his offensive line. I mean, he's not just a quarterback. He's an athlete. Probably could have played 3 or 4 different positions had he gone a different route, in college football. So you could do more things offensively. You can be more creative. And look, we're seeing this throughout the league. Dan Campbell has put a mind virus in the entire league about what you do on 3rd and 4th downs, what you do in red zone with kicking field goals versus going to touchdowns. That's changing. The style of play is changing. We're seeing quarterback runs much more than we've ever. And look, even a guy like Mahomes, who is, basically his natural state is as your classic pocket passer, and famously ran the same 40 time as a combine as Peyton Manning, as much as a stone foot as we've ever seen in the NFL, but was coached a certain way in terms of what you do and don't do with your legs. And in Peyton's case, it was throw it away or eat the sack. Patrick Mahomes has the exact same speed, and we think of him as a mobile quarterback because his offense just functions differently, and he's willing to take more hits than Peyton Manning. The mindset has changed. And look, again, going back to these greatest debates, and where is Andy Reid and the greatest coach of all time? Patrick Mahomes wins this Super Bowl. As unbelievable as it is to think that just a few years after Tom Brady retired, we're considering another guy a strong candidate to be the greatest of all time. I think Patrick Mahomes is already in that conversation. But is Patrick Mahomes going to play 20 years? Probably not. And it's just, again, it's the evolution of the game, and we are seeing the game of football. And honestly, it makes me, as more of a college football fan, really enjoy, forgetting the gambling aspect, just the watching aspect, really enjoy NFL football a lot more than I did 5 or 10 years ago, because one of the things I always hated about the NFL was the fact that everybody played the same goddamn offense.
Right.
While now you're seeing a much greater variety of offenses throughout the league because coaches are willing to be more creative. And again, part of it is coaches are more willing to let their quarterback take hits than they have been for a long stretch there.
True, all of that. Interestingly, from a degenerate standpoint, and I thought this was going to be ringing death for those like me that thought Buffalo had an excellent chance to win the game, and if they do, naturally they cover.
Again, how much
2
I
point spread,
asked this Friday? How much of that was what people actually thought, and how much of that was what people were hoping for because everybody's tired of Kansas?
A little of both. I mean, some of that factors in. If you were just, I mean, like I said, I mean, when you have a game like that, I mean, you can't kill yourself if you were wrong, especially since McDermott makes the decision, which from a betting standpoint, you're horrified sometimes by these because it backfired and then led to them also on a failed 2-point conversion later on. Yeah, but when they originally had the extra point made and got the offsides call, if you're only getting 2 points, you're thinking, please do not take that point off the board.
That the old classic
you look at
coaching
the end
maxim,
result,
you
there
never
it
take
was.
points off the board.
Right. They took the point off the board. Now, I can't say that I would argue with the idea that, especially with the dynamic of the scoreboard at the time, that maybe it was, more worthwhile to go ahead and try and put that second point up in the 2-point conversion try from the 1-yard line, which makes it a much easier proposition. But how many times have you seen that where, and how many bettors saw their money go up in smoke where they either would have had a push or, of course, on the subsequent 2-point try that they missed, they would have just gone ahead and kicked the extra point, and all because the dynamic at the time sort of dictated that, okay, if you have a shot from the 1-yard line, go ahead and try for the 2-point conversion, given a second chance at it. And there it was. I mean, so if you were a Buffalo bettor, and you're looking at that, I remember being horrified when they took that point off the board, thinking it may be the right decision from a strategic standpoint, but it's going to fuck me up from a betting standpoint.
I didn't think it was the right decision. I thought it was too early for it to be honest about
a lot too, where a team, it's 14-12 or whatever, and
it was 21-16 at the time.
Yeah, right.
Again, I get just in terms of raw. Well, let's cut it to 3. I get that part of it, but I think it was too early to start chasing points at that point in the game. My personal opinion, particularly since both teams' offenses were kind of going up and down the field at that point. So I did not like that decision. But hey, look, I'm kind of old school in that I don't like any of these decisions that are going on. I don't like the Redskins went for it on like 4th and 5 from the 50 on the first drive. I was like,
yes.
this is blanking insane. Again, to me, Dan Campbell has kind of created a mind virus among NFL coaches in terms of down and distance situations. But again, it's a brand new day. It's a brand new game. I can appreciate that aspect of it.
And we appreciate you, Professor, coming on and hanging out with us here for the hour. I don't know how inclined you are to do that at any other time in the week, but judging by
do it. That's fine.
The degree of difficulty of you, who are a technical genius and have done many things of this nature and solved many problems at the last second, the degree of difficulty of just getting it started here today makes me think that probably in my hands we'd be on vacation the rest of the week. So,
well, if you're doing an audio show,
yeah,
and a video show, and you leave somebody your computer, don't leave it on freaking mute when you know they're going to be doing a radio show, Lubie. Hey, here's my question that we need to ponder throughout.
There's never been a time that Lubie hasn't left us with some kind of a.
Here's my question that you and I need to ponder throughout the course of the week, Defo. How is it that you and I are sitting here in lovely South Florida, in a bad spot to land? We're in our offices doing a freaking radio show at 8:00 in the morning
with video.
And like the highlight of our week is going to be going to Gulfstream on Friday and get the free lunch, which I always enjoy and I appreciate. But it's
always great.
And Lubie's partying in fucking Barcelona. How does that happen?
It's amazing. Yeah.
If you flash back like 20 years when we first met Lubie and you had said one of these people is going to be partying in Barcelona, Lubie would have been the last round draft pick. Yeah. We would have picked another guy off the street. But, this is not like a Lubie tradition. Is the week before the Super Bowl, he and Shirley go party in some exotic locale.
Yes.
While we're sitting here talking about Taylor freaking Swift for a week.
Yeah, he's eating couscous in Morocco last year. It's amazing. All right, Professor, we love you, man.
Upgraded it this year. He's probably eating tapas right now.
All right, if you're willing to do this again tomorrow, we'll do it again tomorrow. That'd
No
be awesome.
problem, my man.
And a great asset to me, that's for sure. And I'm sure the people enjoyed your presence here on the program. Thanks so much, Professor. And thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 right here on Bleacher Brothers and all of our other affiliates on the next edition of the Defo Show.
Are we going to do the thing?
Do you want to try it? I didn't even throw it to any commercials because I figured that might be an accident waiting to happen. All right, we'll see you tomorrow as we leave you know that.
The time.
Beautiful. It's 9:05.
A happy day.